I am a goldfish. Hello, ladies and laddies. Now, my minus 45 decibel earplugs and I recently got back from seeing the Minecraft movie in theaters, and it's a movie. No argument about that. It's definitely not for kids, but it's also not for adults either. It seems like it fits snugly into a teen to young adult audience with jokes that I don't think kids would understand, as well as some adult jokes that were not subtle enough to go over their heads. Kids can pick up on body language, and, even I was uncomfortable. All of that being said, major spoilers ahead for the entirety of the Minecraft movie if you haven't seen it yet, as well as a few possibly major spoilers for animation versus Minecraft. So we start off with the Mojang logo and modern Minecraft loading screen, which made me really happy to see. We're then introduced to our first character, Steve, who has the same fashion sense that I did as a child, pairing a solid color tee with pants that are just a different shade of the exact same color. He's then chased off by an old man because the mines are for adults only. Fair enough. After this, we see Steve, now fully grown Jack Black, working an office job, and you know what? The jokes here were kind of funny. They weren't anything new, and I'm not sure how relatable jokes about wasting your life away in an office are to the primarily 3 to 5-year-old audience in the theater were, but I thought it was pretty entertaining, at least until he went to eat lunch. As an autistic who used a fork as an infant because I didn't want the food on my hands, this scene made me very uncomfortable, and I couldn't help but wonder how many mashed potatoes he would leave on the furniture on his way to wash it off. But the movie wasn't concerned, so, once again, moving on. Steve's absolute massacre of his lunch, however, reminds him of the mines he once yearned for, and he rushes back to them. And, now that he's an adult, nothing can stop him. I honestly got a little concerned when he went back and the old man wasn't there. Like, it makes sense, but thankfully no. The old man emerges alive and well and attempts once again to prevent Steve from entering the mine before completely disappearing for the rest of the movie, after Steve makes it past him. Steve starts mining away and finds the Tesseract, the orb, and considering the old man couldn't stop him, that implies finding it was a relatively straightforward task, meaning the old man must have known it was there, right? So maybe the old man was guarding it, and that was the real reason he didn't want anyone in there and he worked completely alone. Maybe that's why he's immortal, and when Steve combined the not orb with the box thing, the old man disappeared. Maybe the old man was one of the Steves from an earlier version of the game, and maybe he was protecting the Tesseract, the orb, from being returned to the world of Minecraft. Or maybe not, since he's literally never seen or mentioned again after this. So anyway, Steve opens the portal to the world of Minecraft. Whoa! He starts breaking and building, and I have to be honest here, I really enjoyed this part. I thought it was strange at first how small the broken block was compared to the full-size block, but I really think it was a smart idea to shrink it down that much smaller than in the game. And the way the characters place blocks are like the human equivalent to how Steve places them. I really appreciate the detail. I also thought the "this is my first house" joke was pretty solid, showing a house made of dirt, then stone, then wool. I did think the joke was going in a different direction, though, where his third house would just be this insane mansion, all decked out, but the joke was still solid. I also liked the joke about night being terrifying and happening like every 20 minutes. After this, Steve decides he needed a companion, and this is where I assumed the rest of the main cast would be introduced, and it would continue as some sort of multiplayer campaign. But no, he found a wolf and tamed it with a bone. I had mixed feelings on this concept, as in Minecraft, wolves are neutral towards players, meaning they are peaceful until attacked. But the stance the movie took with wolves is that they are hostile by default, but can be tamed. But they did keep this consistent throughout the movie, so I'll make an exception since the movie lore doesn't necessarily have to be consistent with the actual lore. It also makes it easier to visually showcase when a wolf is wild or tame, so I'll allow it. The dog, named Dennis, and Steve travel to the Nether together through a ruined Nether portal, which I enjoyed seeing, and immediately plop out the portal at a bashed in full of piglin brutes. I thought for a moment that they were normal piglins since they didn't immediately decimate Steve, but the movie confirmed that they were in fact piglin brutes. You know, I guess it was just easier on the movie to change this rule, but considering how easy it would have been to have Steve find something golden in the chest right outside of the portal, put it on like, heck yeah, I needed a new helmet, and they just didn't? But anyway, Steve finds out that the Piglin Sorceress Queen wants the orb. They do make a joke about the orb being a cube a couple of times, and there are orb icons in Minecraft like the Heart of the Sea and things like that, but why not just call it a portal gem or something? Why orb? So he just shows her the orb, before of course getting arrested, because what else did he think was going to happen? And she puts the orb into her staff whilst talking about world domination and turning the sky black for all the monsters to live on the surface. Fair enough. But about this point, I started noticing some similarities between this and animation versus Minecraft, with 5 people going through a portal, ending up in Minecraft, a royal member and a bastion reigning over piglin brutes and seeking a powerful cube to put in their staff in order to black out the sky. And while these stories aren't all that similar as a whole, and creative coincidences happen all the freaking time, where you make something and someone else makes the exact same thing, but neither of you copied the other, I just thought it was interesting, and it did slightly affect my opinion of certain scenes as a fan of AVM, even though they are two separate things. So the queen's goal is to black out the sky so that nether monsters can live on the surface, meaning that they can't already. Remember that. So Steve and Dennis end up escaping prison, and Steve gives Dennis the orb and tells him to hide it under his waterbed, which I thought the water specification would have some sort of significance since he states it 3 times, but it doesn't. Steve gets captured instead of running through the portal with Dennis despite being right there, and gets dragged away. We see Dennis run through the portal and emerge back into the overworld, pursued by piglin brutes who turn to stone, thus establishing why they need to block out the sun. And, hey, wait a minute. If they can't go to the overworld because they'll immediately turn to stone, why doesn't Steve just go stay in the overworld with the orb? My stakes! Where are they? Anyway, Dennis runs all the way to the real world, which he somehow knows how to get to, and all the way to Steve's house, which he somehow knows how to get to, and hides the MacGuffin under Steve's bed. Now, we see our title screen. This is when we're introduced to 4 additional main characters in the real world. We have selfish guy who never grew up and now has a failing business, Garrett, woman with too many side hustles, Dawn, and the kids with the dead mom and no dad, Natalie being the trying hard to be the familial glue sister, and Henry the underappreciated genius ahead of his time who gets bullied for some reason brother. The movie takes a moment to establish each of these characters, which was kind of boring, and I kept wondering when we were going to get back to the Minecraft part of the Minecraft movie. But I guess it's better to take time to establish your characters than simply throw them in, so I appreciate that. Anywho, first off, we're introduced to Garrett, not the Carrot, who was a video game champion back in the day and now has a dying business built off of that fame. We also get to see his exercise routine wherein he uses a weight to practice moving a Joy-Con, which I thought was hilarious. Garrett later gets into storage war, bidding over the storage unit that he believes has an Atari in it that is rare enough to help save his business, and makes a deal with the auctioneer that, if you do this for me, I'll hang out with you. Just about bringing the auctioneer to tears of joy. But then the auctioneer doesn't do anything different, and just straight up bids it off for $900 that Garrett matched the bid for. So what was the point of that last scene? So Garrett opens the box for the Atari and only finds Slinkies. The auctioneer guy says, "I didn't check the box," at which point Garrett trashes the place looking for it, ignoring the orb that falls on the ground, and the auctioneer yells at him to basically pull it together, and then skips to the most cliche, "When are you going to realize the real treasure was your heart?" type of line. Like, excuse me? I feel like there were some lines missing there, and besides, when are you going to realize the treasure is what you sold him for 6 months of his salary? But seriously, how did the orb get there? Did Steve's house get repoed and they just sent it to a storage unit? How's he supposed to know where the storage unit is to get it back? And the unisex blouses that are advertised as part of the unit aren't blouses, they're clearly polo shirts. So, after trashing the place, he takes the orb and displays it on the shelf in his shop. Then we cut to Natalie and Henry. No, wait. His car starts overheating, he creates a fire hazard by shutting one of the polo shirts under the hood of the car, which surprisingly doesn't catch fire. Then we transition to Natalie and Henry, who are driving past, talking out loud to each other about their shared backstory.
Choice either, but it was Mom's dying wish for us to live here.
And his car breaking down or them recognizing him as a crazy screaming dude on the side of the road is never brought up again. They get to the house they can somehow afford and are greeted by Dawn, who I guess knows them already? As 1, she's at their house, and 2, she gives her condolences for their mother. No father is mentioned. I can only assume the worst. Both siblings go in the house to unpack, and Natalie picks up a pig vase and turns it over looking at the "to from," which I assume was their mother. This pig holds no significance outside this moment, so we go to the next scene. It's the following morning, and Natalie makes a tater tot pizza. Apparently her brother is the only genius in the family, and gives it to Henry while reminding him that it's his favorite food that their mom used to make. Wow, I'm so glad she's there to remind him of his favorite food, otherwise he might have forgotten. She does, however, drop a tater tot on the floor. And thus, he runs off to school with a plate full of tater tots before stopping by a video game store belonging to Garrett the Carrot, the animating legend! No, just normal Garrett the normal legend. Garrett and Henry talk about stuff that I honestly can't remember and couldn't hear very well, and Garrett steals the child's lunch in the most barbaric way possible by just digging his fingers right into the plate, aluminum foil and all. What is with this movie and disrespecting potato products? Henry goes to school, apparently unfazed about having his breakfast and favorite meal stolen. Maybe if Natalie was there to remind him he liked her cooking, he would have been more upset, but oh well. Where his teacher goes on a rant about being underpaid and how hard it is being an adult, and just the kids won't understand, and the adults already know, so... Anyway, Henry is bullied for being smart, argues he could build a jetpack, is left unattended to build said jetpack using propane that is just there for the taking for some reason, in this middle school, full of kids and teachers that resent intelligence. Unfortunately for Henry, the bullies cut a random wire on the jetpack right before launch. Thankfully, the worst case scenario doesn't happen here, and the jetpack flies away into a potato factory, knocking the mascot off into the lake. Seriously, what does this movie have against potatoes? I need to know. Who hurt you? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Natalie is working at this potato factory and explaining to a bunch of older staff that you cannot rebrand the potato chip bags as salty sacks, which, one, she was just hired, so I'm pretty sure the people who've been running this business potentially years prior would know better, and two, she just moved here and doesn't know what works for this specific culture. Maybe this is what the people want. Then the giant potato falls into the lake, causing potentially thousands of dollars in property damage. Henry is called into the office and told off before the principal, Marlene, who, by the way, does not mind oversharing the details of her divorce with students, so get used to it, tells him to call his guardian. And Henry calls Garrett, the random man he's met once, to pick him up from school, pretending to be his uncle. And the school does not check, they do not alert his guardian, they do not get any sort of signature or ID. No, instead we get another reminder that the principal is divorced before she goes on a long, growly description of how he can take her to the curb any day. Which was not subtle enough to go over kids' heads. What the flip? Ugh! So Natalie calls Dawn because Henry is missing, so they go to look. Meanwhile, Henry and Garrett go back to Garrett's store, that I forgot to mention is called Game Over World, and sees Henry's drawings, remarking that they're impressive, but then Henry mentions he's going to juvie, keep this in mind, and yeets the sketchbook into a bin. Garrett takes back a flyer he gave him because he won't need it in prison. Henry combines the orb with the box after Garrett reads the multiple warnings on the display shelf about doing so, that he's apparently not read before this, despite being the one to display it, and calling it an instruction manual. You know, Garrett, maybe doing things like finding one-of-a-kind items and then not even bothering looking into them is why you can't break even. Except for the fact that you started off looking for a rare Atari. Also, apparently Steve wrote a warning note to go with the orb despite his whole goal being for no one to find it. Cut to Natalie and Dawn, who realize Henry's fine. He's just playing in an old abandoned mine. Wait a minute, that's not good! So they run down there and, yeah, the old guy's just gone. We don't see him again. Henry gets pulled into the portal and everyone else does too. Finally, we're back in Minecraft in this Minecraft movie. They all fly through the portal as ungracefully as possible, as is the way, and land. A couple minor complaints here. When Dawn flies out of the portal and hits Garrett, she pings off in a pretty jarring way. That's something I've noticed about this movie, is sometimes physics just don't. And two, she lands on her belly and says, "Ow, my butt." So I guess maybe she booty bumped Garrett and that's what made her bounce off? But when I saw the actual scene, I couldn't tell if she hit him with her torso, butt, or feet, so I don't know. Also, Dennis is just wandering around as a squared dog in the real world, and no one bats an eye. Get used to this. Back in the Nether, the Queen realizes that the orb has returned and comes to Steve telling him he stole it so he can get it back, which makes zero sense. What's to stop him from keeping it, you may ask? Well, she pulls out Dennis's collar to show him that they have possession of him. Side note, I don't remember how they got the collar, but point is, they have the collar now. Back to the other four, we see the pink sheep, and it's nighttime suddenly, accompanied by another joke about how quick it was. We see 4 out of our 6 main characters standing in the dark moments before flaming arrows soar over the trees towards them, and several spider jockeys come running out with enchanted bows. Woo! This scene honestly made me so happy. I did a little fist bump in the theater because, one, they actually included an explanation for the fire arrows beyond it just being easier to see the arrows at night. And two, flame bows are my absolute favorite weapon in Minecraft. So, they all charge. The movie has a slow-mo shot of one skeleton accidentally hitting another spider, and it catches fire, stopping them all in their tracks. So I appreciate that as well, that the skeletons didn't just get bored, or whatever else, and choose to leave. Also, Henry cracks his head into a tree so hard the block breaks, which I thought was far more hilarious than any of the 5-year-olds there. especially since it shows them having to punch the block multiple times after in order to break it. It's just... Now, though, we get into some of the points that made me question the audience age for this film, aside from the adult jokes, etc., mentioned earlier. Because some of these scenes would have traumatized me as a child, and they didn't even need to be there. Seeing and hearing a terrified sheep bleeding as a horde of zombies surround it and tear out its wool, seeing the chunks of wool blowing across the ground as the horde tosses it away, doesn't need to be there. All it does is add an element of fear around the zombies that we already get from the rest of the scene. Seeing the zombies surround Garrett as he's trapped outside, crowding him, slamming him against the wall, does way more than enough to add an intimidation factor to the movie. Seeing Steve rip a zombie's arm clean off didn't need to happen in a kid's film. Also, the orb gets broken during this, and Garrett decides the best way to protect it is to only grab one piece of it and shove it in his pants. I feel sorry for the special effects artist who came into work that day and realized their task was to animate the blue glow from the orb onto Garrett's crotch. They did, however, make good use of the creepers in the scene, and when Steve showed up, killed the monsters, and timed their combustion with music, that was a cool scene. I liked it. And it did a good job re-establishing that Steve is experienced in the world of Minecraft. They argue about whether or not to trust Steve and go to the Woodland Mansion to look for the Earth box to reopen the portal, which was destroyed when the orb broke. And it was at this point that I had to use the restroom because I have the world's smallest bladder. Coming back, they're all in a village, in what's either Steve's new house, since it's none of the ones mentioned or shown prior, or a store he's invaded and using as a storage unit. Garrett throws an ender pearl and teleports, which is great for establishing the function of ender pearls for anyone who isn't familiar, and they establish how crafting works and that this is a modded world, since Henry and Garrett make a bunch of new recipes. Natalie and Dawn are talking to a villager about a map, I assume to the Woodland Mansion, which they never receive. The villager gets in a boat and starts floating away, and Natalie mines a block of wood, throwing it into the ocean in an attempt to build a boat. There's a pretty good joke there, actually. But then they just give up. Instead of walking around to the chunk of land where the villager is sailing right next to, they just give up on the map. So that's that, I guess. Side note, now that I think about it, the orb should have been called the Lan, since having the world open to Lan is the only way to enter it. Anyway, the village is attacked by piglin brutes who... Wait a minute. I thought they turned to stone in daylight. Okay, stakes found, I guess. Retcon accepted? The writers probably realized that the piglin being trapped underground removed the stakes, so they changed it. I guess we'll all just forget about the zombification / turning to stone and sunlight thing. So, the piglin attack the village, the girls somehow know how to fight. Garrett knocks out Steve, who should have been fine anyway, because wasn't he literally working for the queen to reclaim the orb? So why would they attack him? Except, no, because the piglin leader literally says he's there to unalive Steve. That's not me censoring, that's literally in the film. Garrett has his butt handed to him, Henry does something, probably, and Natalie and Henry get separated. Steve wakes up, he, Garrett, and Henry run off saying that Natalie and Dawn can meet them at the Woodland Mansion. Garrett throws the child off a cliff after Steve gives them both elytra before jumping off himself. And Steve, realizing he doesn't have a third pair, jumps off and lands on Garrett, somehow being able to catch up. Cue the piglin chasing them through the air on gas, and we get the scene that's just... why? Where, in order to squeeze through a gap, they create a man sandwich. Once again, movie's words, not mine. Which means Steve's face is in Garrett's legs, and Garrett's face is in Steve's legs. Yeah. Except, hold on. You could argue that they needed to be better balanced, but the elytra are on Garrett's shoulders, which means that the most lift is at the shoulders. So by having Steve's center of gravity further away, wouldn't that just make them more off balance? I'm not a physics major, so I couldn't tell you. But wouldn't it be better to have the heaviest part under the most lift and the lighter part where there's less lift? I don't know. Side note, I don't fully remember when this happens, and I've been writing the script for around 5.5 hours now, and I just got a fortune cookie that told me to go touch grass. So I'm just gonna put it here. The main group finally makes it to the Woodland Mansion, and we get the bard distracting the BBEG scene before the kid gets seen in a completely different room, and for some reason the two bards of the party get captured despite not being anywhere near Henry, and Henry isn't caught, only they are. Also, Steve mentions the Vindicators were on the first floor, the Evokers were on the second, and the Endermen were on the third. But I don't remember seeing any Evokers. Doesn't mean they weren't there, it just means I don't remember them. So, Henry gets to the top floor and starts searching the storage room, which had some neat Easter eggs in it. He finds a golden apple, which I wish had actually been used, but was shown and then never referenced again. Then we get the infamous chicken jockey scene. Appreciate the line, "Oh no, it's one of those suggested Vindicator fight clubs," because it means I'm not the only one who assumed that. Meanwhile, the kid is upstairs rifling through the chest, and one conveniently starts glowing. I thought it was a trap chest, but no, it's just a normal chest with an extremely powerful one-of-a-kind object contained in it. Then the Enderman appears, and while they did change what the Enderman's ability set is, I thought it was a pretty neat idea to have it burrow into your mind and repeat your fears. Different, but a good modification nonetheless. Henry defeats the Enderman, grabs an Ender Pearl whose use and rarity was established earlier, and falls through the floor into the fighting ring, where Steve asks him if he found the box while he's holding it. Like, yeah, Steve, I think you found it. Why have the actor put it in his bag, fight the Enderman, pull it out of his bag, then have another character ask? Why not just have him leave it in his bag? But they go to a cavern with a booby trap gag. Steve, I can't remember where the traps are. Garrett immediately steps in a trap, gets shot at, runs past Steve and Henry while still being shot at. Steve and Henry do not get shot, even though they make no effort to avoid it, and Garrett gets launched into the air before hitting his head on the lever that opens the vault to Steve's diamonds. So, I have a question. Why is the lever in a place where a trespasser caught in your trap is led directly to it? Isn't the trap there to protect your vault? But now I get the typical character betrayal that always happens at some point, where Henry finds out Garrett stole the Tesseract to trade it with Steve to get his hands on the diamonds, and he isn't actually concerned about getting home. Except he is? If his goal is to get the diamonds to save his dying business, then he would have to keep the Tesseract to reopen the portal to get home, meaning he wasn't going to give it away to Steve anyway, unless he did it after the portal was open. Well, the betrayal doesn't last long because they're immediately ambushed by a giant piglin. Oh yeah, there's a giant piglin now, the old piglin leader is dead, and the queen stabified a random child for coloring because she hates art. Don't worry about it. They make their way to the mine carts with some mild language. In the kids' movie, where Steve says, if he remembers correctly, there's a safe room up ahead. Spoiler alert, there's not, and everyone just forgets about it. Instead, they end up in a creeper farm, and none of the creepers blow up. Apparently they're all neutral now? Okay. Steve instructs everyone to start slapping the creepers because this will make them blow. I'm telling y'all, this world is modded. And the creepers blow up, the giant piglin survives, everyone escapes, and Garrett dies on the bridge. Although I don't know if anyone in the theater believed it. Steve and Henry wake up in a mushroom house built by Natalie and Dawn because apparently they've been there for a really long time, judging by the surrounding decorations. We can only hope their belongings aren't also in a storage unit. Also, Dennis is there. He approached Natalie and Dawn in the woods, and for some reason Dawn immediately thought to give the hostile wolf a bone from a skeleton that's just chilling on the ground. Except there weren't any skeletons, only a zombie who don't drop bones. Anyway, Dawn knows this wolf is named Dennis. How? Well, because of his name tag. Hold on a second. I personally think it would have been cool if Dennis had become a real wolf and got picked up by the zoo, which would have tied Dawn's subplot of having a zoo on wheels job and better explained her connection with Dennis, recognizing something about him after he escapes back into Minecraft. It also would have explained better why Dennis couldn't reach Steve, as opposed to loitering in the real world before returning to the overworld and simply doing nothing. Also, he was tamed twice, which is, well, not a thing. I guess they needed a reason to have Dennis connect with Dawn, but I don't think that was the best way to do it, personally. And dogs in Minecraft can always find their owners, so why did she need to befriend Dennis to lead them in the first place? Why couldn't Dennis, I don't know, pick up on Steve's scent, and they follow his scent, like Steve told him to when he gave him the orb in the beginning? But Dennis and Steve are reunited, and Natalie and Henry are together again. And they mourn Garrett's sacrifice for 2 seconds, and the queen has the orb. Somehow. Oh, and the principal starts dating a villager that came through the portal. So we find out the queen wanted to dance, but people laughed at her, and she denounced the arts and started unaliving artists, and became obsessed with gold, which I don't see how the obsession with gold has anything to do with wanting to dance outside of her being a piglin, so she must like gold, right? Cut to the end, we get the big climactic battle with iron golems versus piglins. I liked the shot when the giant piglin blasted the iron golem in the abdomen. That was a cool shot. I liked it when Henry used the ender pearl to teleport up to the crystal. We find out Garrett's alive, which we probably all knew anyway, and it was really nice of the giant rampaging piglin to pause before attacking Natalie so that the giant iron golem could come and save the day. They take back the orb, which is in perfect working order despite having been broken earlier in the movie. And the sky clears. The sun turns the piglin to stone, and oh boy. Okay, alright, we're retconning the retcon back to the original established idea. They can't be in direct sunlight anymore, except the queen can be. Well, maybe it's because of her cloak. It's like zombies wearing helmets. She's not in direct sunlight. Okay. So then why are the two piglin right next to her fine? So the ending. Steve spares the queen. I guess he wants her to dry out in the sun or something. I don't know. It's giving off Batman doesn't kill vibes. But he does deliver this one line that I really liked. Creating is harder than destroying, so cowards choose the latter. Actually, he said cowards choose the dos, which is Spanish for two, so cowards choose the two? Does that mean cowards choose both? It should have been cowards choose the second, or whatever the Spanish word for second is. It was almost a great quote, and it just... They repair the portal, Henry forgets he's running from the law and is eager to go home. The tater Natalie dropped on the floor at the beginning is probably really stale by now, and I think we've passed the 10-second rule by this point. Steve gives Dennis away for some reason, even though the whole point he tamed him was to have a companion, and they all convince Steve to re-enter society. So he does! But Don still has Dennis for some reason. Happy ending. Henry's cool now, and not in juvie. Steve and Garrett create Minecraft Street Fighter and get rich. I like the parallel with the name Game Over World being both representative of his failing game over business early on, as well as his successful game based on the overworld near the end. I think that's really clever. Everyone has a big dance party like it's the early 2000s at DreamWorks, and we roll credits. Also, rest in peace to the animals Dawn left in the back of her car when they all got dragged into the portal. There were a lot of them, including 3 different sections for Best Boys, whatever that is. We are then treated to an ending scene with the principal's ex-husband running in and saying, "Really? You replaced me with him?" pointing at the villager, and the villager starts speaking, talking about how when she hit him with her car, which is a surprisingly common meet cute in movies I've noticed, bad advice for real life. Their love was so strong it transcended language barriers, so he can now speak English and she can speak villager. I don't know about you guys, but when I think love that transcends language barriers, I think Ariel and Eric, not immediately learning another language concussion style. Personally, what I think would have been funnier is if the ex-husband came in, delivered his line, and the villager looks at him and just starts speaking villager. The audience can read the subtitles, but have the ex-husband look confused because he doesn't know the language. Then have the principal respond in villager. Maybe it's better for accessibility purposes to have the villager speaking English, though. After this, we get our post-credits scene where Steve goes to see his old house and meets a new homeowner there, named Alex, and honestly, that made me happy. Good way to end it off. All of this being said, was it bad? No. Do I think it was good? I enjoyed parts of it. It had its hits and misses, and there were a lot of retcons, logical leaps, and what felt like missing scenes in dialogue, as well as quite a few Chekhov's guns that never got addressed. It isn't something I necessarily seek out, but it also isn't something that would make me leave the room at a party. I also never saw anything in this that warranted throwing a $6 bag of popcorn at the screen, unless it was a muscle spasm from the insane amount of salt they add in. I never saw the Technoblade reference, unfortunately, because I think I was in the bathroom when it happened, and I never got to hear the fabled Minecraft version of DJ Got Us Falling in Love by Usher, but I did get to hear Lil Boo Thing, so worth it. Also, Garrett the Not Carrot was played by Jason Momoa. I didn't realize this until watching the credits.